Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and we're going to be doing a live stream. So I'm going to give everyone a few more minutes while I get set up. But this would be generally, so for you guys who watch these live streams in the future, this would be a good time for you guys to start leaving your questions. So that way, if you want me to answer them during the live stream, I can answer them. So go on and do that. And basically what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start taking down some of these banners. So let's take that one down. Oh, no, actually I want to keep that one up. There we go. And basically today, I literally just woke up, but basically what we're going to be doing today is just continuing on with the discussion of Express that I started yesterday. And so in that case, I should probably share my screen. So let me go share Visual Studio. Okay, nice. And again, we'll get started in one more minute, and then I will begin all the fun discussion of Express. But just to kind of recap where we left off last time, we had installed Express as part of our NPM project. We had set up the basic script so that way you can create routes, and we talked a little bit about params and queries, which are part of the request object. So again, that request object allows us to basically take information from our requests. So we'll explore what's inside the object a little bit more. Okay, I think we are good to go. So I'm going to just continue on. Okay. So basically, what you can do in these routes, again, think of if you've written a function before. When you write a function, typically the function ends when the function returns a value. So anything you put after the return doesn't happen. Think of the response, the res object, when you do something with the res object, kind of like the return on the route. It's when the route is done working. Because the job of Express is just to return a response to the request. So once the response is sent, it's done. So you want to do whatever you want to do before you send the response. So, and let's say, what happens is that you may want your server to, basically you want to know certain details. So in that case, I want to print it to the server console, which is not something that the user can see. It's something that's seen on the server. Okay. So I may want to console log the request object because I just want to know what's in there. So I'll say console log rec. I'm not sending rec back. I could. We'll do that too. So actually, we'll do both. We'll also send rec back to the browser, and we'll change this route to just request. So this way, when you go to /request, this is what it will give you. Save that. And so again, we're creating a route that is called request. We're going to console log the request object so we can see all the information that's in there. We're also going to return it. So let me start off the server, node index.js. Neat. And so the server is running. Now let me make a request to that route. So that'd be localhost 3000. So I'm doing it. You don't see my browser, but I am putting in the request to localhost 3000 /request. So you can see what happens on the console. So actually just make the console bigger so you can see what happens. So when I'm doing in the browser, I'm making a request to that endpoint. So where was I? Localhost request. Okay. Now I got an error on this side because that object's way too complicated. But let's see what you got here. So this is a nice preview of everything that's inside that request object. So you have all this kind of information that you can play with. This is not a bad thing to necessarily just spend some time looking at. So you can get the information of like sort of what the endpoint was. So like what URL did they send in to get to this route? You can pull that information from there. You can get the method. So if you wanted to test the method. Now, why would I care about getting the method if I've already kind of specified the method by doing app.get? It's because maybe you will do a route called app.all. I'm pretty sure we'll test that out in a second. Pretty sure there is an app.all. Again, there's other information here. Status codes right now is none because This is just requests. Usually you respond with a status code that's at the 200, 400. And usually the idea, basically whenever you make a response, there's an inherent status code that goes with it. Express handles a lot of that for you. So when you do res.send, it's already doing it for you by default. There are ways to specify it, but the idea is that you can send a code that kind of tells you, was the response successful or not? So typically, like if the response says 200, the response was successful. If the response says some other number, then usually there's some sort of issue with it. And over time, you get used to what the numbers are. You just have to kind of Google them at first. And I'll show you where you can kind of check that in a second. But let's just keep going through here. So all this other information. So this is a part of a socket. Events. Okay, so these are different events you can create functions based on. So, and timeout, data, error, close. Okay. You know, a lot of this stuff you probably never use. It's usually used by a lot of the functions in Express, so you don't necessarily have to play with this. Or they're used by really kind of unique edge cases. But there are some parts that are pretty interesting. So again, like the URL and the method up there. Let's look for other pretty useful pieces of information. Okay, a lot of stuff here. Base URL. Well, since we're working off localhost, there is no base URL. There's the endpoint. You request. So there's params and query. So again, it's going to separate out the params and queries if there is any, but there isn't any on this particular request. There's headers, but there aren't any headers in this request. Route. Okay. And then it errors. Converting circular structure to JSON, starting at object with constructor socket. Yeah, eventually there's some parts of it that are not able to just be displayed. So that's why you get this error. So let me show you what happens inside Chrome when I did that, went to that route. Okay, so let's see here. Let's share Chrome. Okay, so here it didn't show the object at all because the minute it noticed there was a part that it couldn't parse, it just stopped. Okay, but if I hold Control-Shift-I to bring up the inspector, let's see what the response was. So you can see like how this all works. Okay, so here we go. Let's see here. Yeah, let me refresh this. And see, you see the request, and you see the request had an error. Okay, let me go to the original request. So, see, this request went fine. So you got a 200 status code. Okay, this one they don't want to let me click on. So there's a whole series of different errors. Okay, well here you can usually see where all those status codes and errors are. Here, let me go to a successful request. So let's go to the root. Okay, again, that was hello world. And you see 200, 304, which means not modified. Again, I always forget what all these different numbers mean. So 304 not modified. Let's see what that specifically means. Okay. Okay, so there is no need to retransmit the requested resources. It is implicit. It is an implicit redirection to a cached resource. This means that when the requested might, okay. So what that's telling us is that it didn't technically pull the information again. Since it knows that we've been to this website before, it just pulled the cached version from our computer. So that's why it happened so quickly, which can be a good thing or a bad thing. It makes the browsing experience faster, but if there's updates, it may not cache those updates. And this is why you would do like a hard refresh, which is usually done by hitting like Shift and then refresh. So let's try that out. Okay, and see now this time you have two 200s for localhost because it actually went and requested from localhost to get actually the current version of the website instead of using its cached version. And if I refresh again, see once again it's using the cached version. So if you're wondering like, is this pulling from the cache or is it pulling from a fresh version? You can take a look here. And how did I get that? It's in the network tab of your DevTools. Okay. So that's neat. That's useful. Okay, so let's switch on over back to VS Code. Okay, so let me bring this back down. Let's do something more interesting. Okay, let's actually start working with views. So there are several different view engines. So the idea is that now you actually want to start creating like a page. You don't want to just send. I mean, I could send HTML in this string. That's not the way to do things. Okay, so I want to actually start creating like HTML pages. Now there's a couple different ways we can do this. You could set up what's called a public folder, which is actually the route that will go first. Okay, so what that means is we need to start setting up what's called middleware. We're going to block off a section, and we're going to call it middleware. Okay, this just makes it clear what's what. So this is our middleware. So middleware is not a route. So it won't send the response, but it'll do things. And generally, you want to set up your middleware to run before your routes, because your routes will send the response. And the idea is that maybe several pieces of middleware will do things. You could set up middleware inside the route if it only is needed when that route hits. But there's oftentimes you have middleware that's used for every route. So that goes. So what that does is you use a function called app.use, and this means use this function. And since I put it up here, it's going to run through anything I have here in this middleware section before it's just looking through the routes. Okay, so I'll separately block that off, the routes. But think about it this way. If a request comes in, it starts at the top, goes through each middleware, does whatever that middleware does, and then it goes to the routes and then looks for a route that matches the request, that matches the endpoint, and then runs that request. And if it doesn't find anything that sends any kind of response, that's when it says cannot get / because it didn't have anything to give you. So that's essentially the nature of the behavior. So that's why it does matter which routes you put in which order. Because of the nature of like URL params, you could accidentally create a route that gets hit before another route gets hit, or the route you intended. So generally you want to put the stuff that has params towards the bottom and stuff that doesn't have params on top. So that way it checks all the non-param routes before it checks the param routes. And again, what are params? Those variables in the URL. Okay, those things like this. Okay. So app.use, I'm pretty sure it's express public, or is it .static? Yeah, express.static. And then here we put a name of a folder, which is going to be public. Okay, pretty sure that's how that goes. So basically what happens is that this is a function that says we're going to have a folder for static assets, meaning just files that you can just point to. And that folder is going to be called public. So in our project folder, we'll create a new folder. Just make sure I'm just selecting the folder there. New folder, it's called public. And what's going to happen is that it would look inside this folder to see if there's any files that meet the route. So right now, technically, if I go to the root, it takes me here. But what I could do is I could create a file here, call this not index.html, because then it'll conflict with the index route. We'll say test.html. Well, I wrote text, but whatever. Okay, and then we'll just do a basic HTML file. So HTML. Okay, and then we'll just do an H1 that says hello world. Okay, and then actually let me add an H2. This is from the static folder. Save. Okay, and now let's restart the server, so that way it uses that middleware. And it's really annoying having to restart the server over and over again, right? So there are other ways. Okay, so let me just fail the current server. I want to do is install something called nodemon. So I'm going to do npm I node imon. Sounds like a Pokemon, but what it means is that it sets up a watcher. A watcher, basically what it does, it watches for changes in files. And that watcher will watch to see if there's any changes in your JavaScript files. If there's a change in your JavaScript files for this project, it'll restart the server for you. This way, you don't have to keep turning off Node all the time, because Nodemon will do it for you. It'll stop the server and restart it. This way, the server is constantly reflecting your most updated version of changes. So once that's installed, now is a good time to start a script, because, I mean, I could just type in nodemon server.js or index.js, actually. I could do that, and that will work just fine. But this is a good time to show you scripts. So I'm going to go to my package.json. Usually use nodemon strictly for development, because you don't want your live server restarting every few seconds. Okay? Because what happens when your live server restarts, it cleans out all the information it has in memory, which is not something you'd necessarily want in real life. But for dev purposes, that's useful, because when you make changes, you want to update those changes. So we'll create another script called dev, and that dev script will be nodemon index.js. So we're using nodemon instead of that. Okay, so that's in there. And now I can go here and type in npm run, which means run one of the scripts in my scripts, npm run dev, and it will run my dev. Okay, see, it's starting up. There it goes. Good, 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 good. Let's head back over to Chrome. Okay, so hello world. So let's now, because basically the way the public folder works, that it treats the route, like it treats the folder as if it's the root. So if I want to get to that text.html file, I'll just type in text.html, because it starts at the route or the root. See, it brings up that file. So instead of me having to develop a whole route to access that one file, if I'm just doing certain static files, I could just do this. I could just create the HTML file and put it right there. Okay, and if you wanted to create like a full-on React application, let's say, you could just literally plop it in your public folder and be good to go. If you choose to. Okay, but that's what the public folder is. So that's one way to actually start being able to like make HTML files. And then you can actually sit here and create like CSS files and link to those as CSS files. And again, just to kind of show you how this go even deeper, let me go back to VS Code. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to close this. And I'll close this for a moment, close all this for a moment. Go in my public folder, I'm going to make another folder called Hey. I'm going to copy the HTML. Actually, I'll create an index.html in there. Just I want to show you that generally by the default behavior when you're serving static files is that when you just type in the name of the folder, it's going to look for an index.html. Okay, so then I just do the same thing again with my HTML boilerplate. H1. This time we'll put in the style equals color orange, so that way we can tell that it's this particular file. Hey there. Hit save. Okay, notice that nodemon does not restart. Okay, why? Because nodemon only restarts when JavaScript files change or any of these extensions change. Okay, now let's go back to the browser. Okay. Oh, that's not quite the effect I wanted. That's better. Cool. So let's test that out. So again, we start off from the root when we're using the public folder, and then next it's in a folder called hey in that folder. And then I can just do hey. And since I didn't specify a file, it's going to default to an index.html if there is one. And see, and that's exactly what it does. And again, here you have your 200s. So those are successful requests that got successful responses. Okay. So neat. Okay, so I think that's a pretty good next step on this live stream. I will see you guys in the next one with whatever topic that I will cover. Again, if you get there early enough, you can start leaving questions in the comment section so that we can answer them during the live stream. But you guys have a great day and enjoy.